I do not live stream. I only film 2 minutes at a time. I
Oh, nice.
okay, so is I.
Thanks. You want to mic me up?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a little Oreo. And okay, yeah, the antennas are yeah. That's a little cheap sex. Yeah, yeah, to get in line of sight. Well, you know you're good, right?
Put that on there.
Really hard on.
Gather round, gather round, gather round. Here we go. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The great Ivan is about to speak and hold forth.
You standing?
Welcome,
I'm gonna stand.
welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome, welcome. Ivan Raiklin, Deep State Marauder.
Relax. Let's get this set up. What's up, Corinne?
I love you though.
You got my chart?
Oh my god, it's in the car. Yeah. I really found this place. I don't know how I found this place. I found it.
Hold on. I'll move stuff. Thank you.
I'm gonna open it and I'm gonna talk to you. How about that?
Yeah, since you're local.
Hey, Ivan, get your Twitter. Open your Twitter. I'll connect it.
How?
I'll just connect it to mine.
All right.
There's not live streaming capability, is there?
Some people have.
I'm live streaming.
Oh, okay.
You're already on.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're live?
Yeah.
We're live.
Welcome to the Reawaken America Tour. My name is Noel Fritch with National File. I am a North Carolinian. I publish the National File. National File, if you live in North Carolina, if you've heard of North Carolina, we're the guys who took out Cal Cunningham. All right, Cal Cunningham, the defeat gave us a 50-50 Senate. Thank God we needed it because Nancy had the House and Joe had the White House. We are lucky to have Ivan here with us today. And we're going to explain a lot about how we can hold these electoral votes here in the state of North Carolina in 2024 to make sure that we do not lose them. Very brief synopsis. Basically, here's what it boils down to. Every state legislature in the United States, in the Union, has vested in itself the power to directly appoint that state's electors. You heard it. I'll say it again. Every state legislature can literally just convene a special session and say, we would like to award our electors to Donald J. Trump, the 45th and now 47th president of the United States. That is possible. That is legal. They have the power to do that. They do not want you to know that they have the power to do that. And so that is why we are here today. That is why we have a constitutional attorney, Ivan Raiklin, and he is going to walk you through some of this, and you can read it at nationalfile.com. Ivan's going to explain further, and without further delay, Ivan Raiklin.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Noel. So just a little bit more before I go into the details. National File is the publication that broke the Ashley Biden diary story. Okay? It is the publication that broke Mike Pence.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because of the work and kind of describing the constitutional process of the Electoral Count Act, the 12th Amendment, the 10th Amendment, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, back in 2020, when they conducted the illegal election of 2020 into the Fedsurrection setup where Mike Pence presided over that Fedsurrection without a quorum. National File reported on it, was the first publication to go into all details, okay? That's why when USA Today or Raw Sewage or Washington Compost calls me, texts me, tries to communicate with me, they have proven to me that they are epic, disastrous failures, neophytes. I got no time for them. I only have time for critical thinkers that are willing to withstand a barrage from the communists to put the truth out. That's you guys. So kudos to you and National File. Now we're in North Carolina. We're what, 2.5 weeks away from November 5th. Everybody's concerned. How do we address the 23 out of 25 majority counties or majority Republican voting counties that were just decimated in Western North Carolina? Because if you take those counties out of the equation, 25 counties is 25% of the 100 counties in North Carolina. 25% of the electoral system in North Carolina was decimated. What does that mean? And help me out here. Does that mean the postal services in those counties are probably running at a much lower capacity level?
Absolutely.
Does that mean that there may have been ballots and registration paperwork destroyed in the process?
It was.
Does that mean that certain folks not only were killed from being able to vote, some argue similar, depending on the theory you believe, similar to how Mr. Cuomo in New York murdered and slaughtered in nursing homes the preponderance of conservative Republican voters that are elderly so that they get genocided through remember the pandemic? He genocided many people. Well, what's to say, regardless of theory, right? Many people died, families were disrupted, destroyed, and their focus is now to conduct recovery and humanitarian assistance and get their life back in order. Amidst all of that, U.S. Postal Service, the registration documents, the ballots, this is impacting the election in North Carolina in this election cycle. So then it begs the question, how do we resolve this? Because this is a calamity. There's very simple constitutional ways to do that. If you heard my speech, I kind of talked about a little bit, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. The state legislatures, meaning they're run by the Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, and the Senate President, who's the Lieutenant Governor, runs the Senate. The way we ran elections for President and Vice President early in our country's history, it wasn't by popular vote. It was by the legislative body. Imagine this side of the room is the state house. This side of the room is the state senate. You convene on election day to say, hey, we allocate our electors for president and vice president to whoever you decide to vote for. And then you send that to the federal Congress. That law is still on the books, known as Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. So, of all the 50 states,
Wait, where is it again? Say it again.
Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, 212.
It's in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. It's law.
So if Elon Musk has been saying he wants to make sure that the Constitution is followed, Elon, listen closely, sir. Respectfully, read it, learn it, understand it. Have your legal team read it, learn it. People that you trust, and don't take it from me. Have them read it and advise you on it. Joe Rogan, do the same thing. Contact your most trusted lawyer that you know. Read it, learn it, understand it. The precedent is there as recently as 2000. Recent article written by National File goes into the details of all the recent precedent that will debunk anybody saying that, oh, we can't do it this way. You're taking the vote from the people. We're not taking the vote from the people. We're taking the vote away from machines. We're taking the vote away from software. We're taking the vote away from illegals voting. We're taking the vote away of the foreign interference from happening. We're taking away the dirty voter rolls from being used. We're taking away every single layer of fraud, deceit, corruption, manipulation, as well as addressing the 25 counties that were just decimated from participating in this 2024 election cycle. How? 100. We know that there are 120 registered voters in the state house in North Carolina. Actually, 118 since there are 2 vacancies in the house. We know that there are 50 registered voters in the Senate, totaling 160, or what is that? 168 because of the 2 vacancies. We know who is registered by which party. 70 Republicans in the House out of the 118, and 30 of the 50 in the House are Republicans. Excuse me, in the Senate. And then 20 Democrats in the Senate, and whatever the remainder is there. What is that, 48?
50, 48, yes.
Democrats in the House. Meaning America, the world, North Carolina knows exactly how many registered voters there are, who's registered by what political party. They're there legitimately based on the consent of the governor because they were voted in. And now it is up to us to explain to those 168, or at a minimum, start the process with the Speaker and the Senate President to go ahead and say, hey, now that you understand the circumstances of this election cycle, you have the legal, moral, and ethical duty, obligation to conduct the most free, fair, and transparent election in North Carolina since over 100 years, to avoid all the layers of manipulation, fraud, deceit, etc., and guarantee that it is free and fair. Just explain it. It's legal, it's moral, ethical, and more importantly, it will be the most transparent endeavor ever. Why? Because it will be live streamed on the state. What's the name of the state public broadcasting network?
PBS, yeah.
C-SPAN can cover it.
Yeah.
Oh, who else? Rumble can cover it. X can cover it. CD Media News can cover it. National File can cover it. Who else can cover it?
Citizen Media News.
What's
What did I say?
I don't know what you said.
Citizen Media News.
Let me jump in.
Who else?
Apostolic conservatives.
Freedom makers. Now it's time.
All of you can live stream every individual vote.
It's a good brand.
That is the most free, fair, safe, secure electoral process that you can do. And it's totally lawful.
The reason that you've had 4 years of this insurrection nonsense is because they do not want you to know the civic act that was taking place on January 6th. It was a joint session of Congress, and they do not want you to know that what was to take place there was the ratification of 50 separate elections. That is what a federal election is at the national level. It is 50 separate elections. They do not want anybody to know that that's what was going on that day. I was running the whip count. I was overjoyed that we got to 141 votes against. My good buddy Paul Gosar stood up, and he was the first one to say, we will not accept these slates of electors. We will reject them. Ivan and I worked very hard for weeks trying to get as many folks as we could to say no to those slates of electors. Mike Pence plans to be on vacation. That tells you what Mike Pence thinks about
Was he going to be
Israel or somewhere. But that tells you what Mike Pence thinks about the process of your federal government and his role as the Senate president in representing the will of the people. That tells you what he thinks. And so we have to do it all over again, guys. If there is a January 6th type of scenario, it does not need to happen in Washington, D.C., ladies and gentlemen. It has to happen in Raleigh. It has to happen in Madison, Lansing, Phil, not
in
Philly,
December.
Harrisburg.
In December.
When he says a January 6th situation and
Peaceful
scenario,
protest.
he's referring to an election crime protest, right? So on November, if this doesn't take, or we have what, 2.5 weeks where we can document polls being manipulated, closed.
Machines not working.
Machines not
Observers not being allowed in. workers being denied, things like that. That happened
needs to be
yesterday.
Documented by everybody, posted on the free speech platforms as we amplify it. The bigger influence.
Extremely important to note. This is not just for states that happen to have a force majeure or a cataclysm like Helene. This is every state legislature has vested within it the power to directly appoint those electors. That's Wisconsin. That's Pennsylvania. If the speaker doesn't hand his gavel away, kind of like Dick Levine did.
Ivan,
And if you, last thing I'll say on this, if we do exactly that across all 50 states, or just the states that have Republican majorities in the House, state House and Senate, 276 electoral votes are controlled. What's the magic number? 270. That is the checkmate. That is the 4 middle fingers to the deep state, right? Now, are we going to get there? That depends on informing the masses. That depends on if Elon Musk wants to move on this. I see that he's doing the traditional, register to vote, vote. Everyone has to do that minimally. And you have to do as much as you can to make sure as many people register and then vote, right? In addition to that, we have to observe and monitor the election process. It started in North Carolina yesterday, right? It goes through November 5th. More evidence. The more evidence you show, and that millions and tens and hundreds of million people to see that it's illegally run, that creates the political motivation for the Speaker of the House. When I say motivation, use that term creatively, okay? There's different ways to motivate people, isn't there?
absolutely.
Right? Yes, sir.
Go and demand that your speaker call a special session and appoint the electors. Go demand that your Senate leader or your Senate president hold a special session and appoint the electors directly. You have to demand that in your states.
And if they
that is how
don't,
this works.
if they don't do it on November 5th because they want to run the conventional popular vote, meaning the machine popular vote, if there's evidence that there's an illegally run election again, then they have from November 5th into January 6th to go ahead and run a joint session to say, you know what? State legislature is going to present the evidence that you have all collected, provided to them of an illegal election, and they have to step in and say, no, stop. Illegitimate, full stop. We're going to do this and supersede the underlying illegalities. That is what that Pence card memo called on in 2020. We are now doing it again this time around, but we are going to pre-bunk the fraud.
Hey, Ivan, on January 6th, you said it was a joint session. So that meant 435 House of Representatives, 100 senators. That's 535 people. On January 6th, when they were certifying the election, how many members of Congress were actually there? And was there a quorum?
Different question, but I'll answer it real quick. So Mike Pence is the presiding officer, the VP, the presiding officer, and vice president. Listen to Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi only allow 11 Republicans from the House, 11 Democrats from the House, 11 Republicans from the Senate, and 11 Democrats from the Senate to be on the floor of the House in the joint session. That's 44 people. So 22 in the House out of 435. Is that 2/3 of the states being represented? 22 out of 100 senators. Is that 2/3? These are the 12th Amendment requirements. That's my long answer to say no.
There was not a
There
quorum.
was not a quorum.
So it wasn't legal.
Courtesy of Mike Pence. Now, one thing I want to end on before we open it up to questions. Each state has a different legal process on its participation and influence and impact on how electors can or will be allocated under that legislative frame. North Carolina specifically. You got the vote on November 5th, and then guess, not only are you only voting on the president and vice president, But who else are you voting for on that day, November 5th?
The electors.
The state house
State House, State Senate.
members and the state senate members. So the current members that are in play, the numbers that I laid out to you, that is in play through through December 31st under North Carolina law. Meaning, whoever you vote in on November 5th takes the reins on January 1st, 5 days before the joint session in Congress. What does that come? What comes to mind when you think that through? If you House and Senate are now in place and your previous House and Senate did not do the righteous thing of remedying the illegal election potentially that was observed, documented, and displayed for the whole world to hear and see, what is your obligation now, new House and new Senate, on January 1st, 5 days before January 6th, which is your technical quasi deadline to transmit your state's electors for president and vice president to the joint session on January 6th? Anyone?
If you have a question, they should question it.
How about you say, here's the evidence. We're going to allocate the electoral votes based on our lawful authority legislature. Here you go, presiding officer. And when it comes down to it, people are like, well, the Supreme Court's going to decide. Jamie Raskin's going to do this. Hakeem Jeffries or the weak-kneed rhinos in the Republic. Guess what, folks? The federal government exists because the 50 states legislatures created it.
Yeah.
So in a conflict between the state legislature allocating its own electors versus a federal Congress that says we're not going to accept that legislative allocation, the Supreme Court will always side with the state legislature. Not only for legal reasons, but because guess what the entire electorate of North Carolina demanded the legislature to do? That is a lot more people, influence, and motivation that is primed to motivate the Supreme Court to rule constitutionally versus the 535.
Is this the same?
Guaranteed.
North Carolina.
Ma'am?
Is it the same in all 50 states or is it specific to North Carolina?
That authority is all 50 states, but the timing and sequencing of any sort of legislative construct flip, that date's specific to North Carolina.
Got it.
You have another state you want to ask about? I'll tell you.
Pennsylvania, all of them.
So Pennsylvania is December 1st.
Montana.
New York is December 1st.
Florida.
So as you want to know more about these details, you will observe in bite-sized chunks as the electoral calendar continues. You will read about it on National File, and you will read about it on my X account, Ivan Raiklin, as I go into every little nuance of every single state that this is going to be applicable to. Sir.
All right, Will Jones, Africa News. Now, playing devil's advocate.
Bring it.
Down in Georgia, we just had the Board of Elections months ago, thanks to the new conservative being added to the board, ruled that they had to count the ballot on the precinct level.
Great.
And it was agreed upon. That should be, they were elected and a couple appointed, but constitutionally by Georgia. But we have a judge from Fulton County, where we all know all the drama started with their,
That's an illegal ruling.
it's a,
That's an illegal ruling.
how long or when, who needs to protest this or
You got to go tell your Speaker of the House and your leader of your Senate to call a special
What's
session.
his name? Ralston?
Now he's gone.
Who's the new Speaker of the House in
We need to
Georgia?
find out.
I think it's It's a Kennedy. I believe it's.
They got a new one. They got a new
It's
speaker.
Kennedy that is
president, but it's Phil Berger in North Carolina. Phil Berger isn't going to be the guy who decides if there's going to be a
Bert Jones, lieutenant governor in Georgia.
well, so it depends on who leads your Senate.
This. We've been spending the last 4 years poking the bear back, right? At what point is the bear going to? How long do you have to poke someone before any sort of pain happens? So you're never going to get pain, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you use an ice pick, you can be the most diminutive, weak, frail octogenarian up against the meanest, strongest, biggest, baddest bear. I guarantee you, a very acute ice pick is going to make that bear at a minimum flinch.
Right in the eye, right in the temple.
And depending on where you place that ice pick, and I'm using this in the kind of metaphorical manner,
Figurative.
figurative. So apply that philosophy to the Speaker of the House of your state, the Senate, whoever the governing authority, because it's a little different in each state, right? Nebraska's unique. It has a unicameral system. It's only a state Senate, okay? So then you go, hey, Speaker of the House, Majority Leader, or Senate President, pro tempore, here's your authority. Here's the evidence of all the electoral illegalities. If you do not remedy that, we, the people, all of us, are going to blame you for it. And oh, by the way, to remind you, I'm your biggest donor. I am your teacher of your whatever.
Yeah.
I am a business owner in your district. I vote in your district. And remember what we did to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and Mike Pence?
Yeah.
Take that on steroids times 1,000,000,000,000 squared. That's what we're going to do to you.
And it's easier at the state level. It's actually way easier at the state level. Tim Moore's House district is tiny. You only have to have 50 or 100 people like really angry with him in his district. Now he's going to be in the House, the U.S. House. But still, that holds. Those numbers hold. One last thing I'll mention. This is not us making this up, guys. The beauty of this is the most recent iteration of this rationale that we've seen, that most of y'all were alive for and sentient for, was in the year 2000 in Florida with the crazy Catherine Harris and the hanging chads and Bush v. Gore. It's not me making this up. I'm just a guy who knows how to read some stuff. It was George Bush's attorneys, okay? George W. And he had, of course, HW and the CIA's paid attorneys working for him. This is the rhino establishment, the deep state establishment making this argument. And they took this argument to Tallahassee. And then the Supreme Court was like, hold on. Let's not let them know about that. We'll make the decision. And that's what they did. They have a lot of ways that they can avoid accountability. And they did it in Bush v. Gore with the hanging chads. And we need to take that away from them, take away their excuses, and reintroduce accountability at the grassroots level with the Speaker of the House, with the leaders of the Senate at the state level. That's how we win.
It puts them in a position to want to make sure that the election is free and fair and secure so that they're not put in that position.
Question is for both of you, but he's got my microphone, so let him yell the loudest. But my question is, what little education I'm getting, it seems like the power of our government is being shifted from a large federal government down to more of a state and a county, local level. What should we as citizens be doing with our time and our talent to study things? Should we be more local, as the general fund suggesting, while keeping an eye on the federal government? Or should we be going after the federal government, holding them accountable to push everything back to a state level where it should have always been?
I'll take that a couple
It's time to
steps.
repeat or rephrase the question.
The question is the federal government right now, especially the executive branch, a belligerent, illegitimate, occupying force of the people? And how do we counter that? I think is the question.
Yeah.
Absolutely they are. And so when you have an illegitimate, belligerent Chinese Communist Party ambassador to the U.S. squatting in the White House as a dementia patient, Okay? I'm not joking when I say that. That is all factual. While the Congress, the toxic, feckless, gutless, stoneless turds from the Republican controlled House
Also owned by
and the
China.
Democrat, what?
Also owned by China.
Also, many are China first, Ukraine first, or Israel first
Yeah.
members of the Congress
Right.
are allowing for that CCP agent to continue to run policies that benefit China, Ukraine, and Israel at the expense of Americans. That's when we have to mobilize with the influence and the power that we have. The precincts, the counties, the districts, and the states, district attorneys, sheriffs, attorneys general, state police, to basically say, hey, neighbors, you see this? This is a federal officer. They violated our law. We in the millions have your back unless you don't do anything. If you do something, meaning set the precedent that Fulton Fatty has done,
Uh-huh.
or Alvin Bragg has done, set the objectively reasonable precedent set by Metropolitan Police Department officer Lila Morris against Roseanne Boylan, set the precedent conducted by U.S. Capitol Police Officer Michael Byrd, objectively reasonable against Ashley Babbitt, they said. How about our local officials start to understand and hear this? Because it comes down to this. People act when it's the path of least resistance. When we overwhelmingly, uncensored now, thanks to X and Elon and Rumble, you guys, we have the preponderance of the critical thinkers on our side that have much more influence than the entire manipulated morons from Facebook and Insta garbage. And that's where we create that ice pick intellectual
So
and
other than
in-person
losing our
pressure.
hope, what do they fear most about us?
What's that?
Other than losing our vote, what do they most fear about us?
If you look at the history of humanity, what happens when the people realize the game and the individuals behind it that have murdered, mutilated their children, okay, mutilated their own bodies through fraud and deceit, and then they realize who individual was behind it. They know where they live, the address, the vehicle name, make, and model type, and their phone number, their cell phone number, their pattern of life. What do you think that community does to that individual?
Day might come where they can't even walk
Objective.
down the street.
They create objectively reasonable responses.
Then would you do me one last favor?
All right.
Wait. I just need Ivan just to hold there for 1 second. This is personal. Would you please say to the family of Scott Zimmerman, he is not crazy? Just say.
I can't attest to that. I can't attest to that. You have to make your own judgment. But as far as I understand, it is lonely being first, right? How many years did it take us to get Barry Loudermilk to finally be like, oh, wait, the January 6th committee report was complete lie about this fabrication. And there probably was a Fed's direction, right? Last week is when he got to that point.
You're still barely there.
We're still there.
Yeah.
So to respond to your family, it is lonely being first and dragging everybody to catch up to you. I suspect Scott is part of that first wave.
I'll take it.
All right. Just to wrap up here, we've got some stories coming. Look, there's this too big to rig narrative. You cannot believe the too big to rig narrative. It's not true. Too big to rig is the same as big red wave. We remember how that ended for Kevin McCarthy's little pink trickle. Okay, he barely held the majority. Big red wave.
The
was, of course,
jointly managed pink trickle.
yeah, jointly managed pink trickle with Marjorie. the pink trickle before it was the pink trickle, the big red wave failed. That was trust the plan. And I know there's lots of Q adherents here. Sorry, this is reality. Too big to rig is Q 3.0. It's bogus. It's intended to lie and to deceive you and to make you think that there's this
But you
other.
still got to vote. Like you still
You
got
do.
to
You
vote
got
for that process.
even more to the point. Yes, you have to you vote harder. No, don't vote harder. Get everybody else you can out to vote, and then bring the metaphorical ice pick out to your Speaker of the House. Bring the metaphorical ice pick out to your Senate leader, and then you got to really pay attention in these 5 counties that matter. Everybody's worried about these other states that really don't matter. No offense. It's really Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia, and North Carolina. That's it. Maybe Nevada. Okay. But if we can win those, we can win. Okay. And you can't just trust that, oh, Trump's going to be able to run election day operations and make sure that it's not stolen, because then we're going to go to the courts. Well, who owns the courts? Don't you think that they knew when they picked the election stealing path and plan that they knew they were going to end up in court? Yes, they knew they were going to end up in court. And guess what? They still chose to do it. Why? Because they knew they would win there. Okay? This is why you have to run it from the state legislature.
Yep.
Why are we letting our enemies choose our battlefield for us? We need to stop. This is to answer your question. We need to, smart people need to stop allowing our enemies to choose our battlefield. They don't choose the battlefield that we fight on. We choose the battlefield that we fight on.
I'll see you in Raleigh at the state capitol on January 1st.
State capitol, go get your Speaker of the House, go get your Senate leader, tell them directly appoint the electors to Trump or else. And that is it. That's all I got.
Or else stands for the most legal, moral, ethical, peaceful, and patriotic endeavor
Attorney
these people have ever experienced in their life. To the
Very
max.
peaceful.
Yeah.
Very
Squared
peaceful.
on steroids times a trillion.
Why would you encourage people to look into the true power of our sheriffs? Why would we ever want to do that?
Oh, we're still going?
Are we- Yeah, the sheriffs can make this happen.
Watch my 18-minute video with the National Poison Radio reporter.
Let's wrap it now. Thanks, guys.
Hey.
Thank you all.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good.